You are listening to the IoT For All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, and on today's episode, we have Jacob Swinn, the Product Marketing Manager at Helium. Helium, for those of you who may be unfamiliar, is building the world's first decentralized wireless network to simplify connecting devices to the internet by rewarding anyone who becomes part of the network. So we're going to actually talk a lot about Helium and kind of how it operates, how decentralized connectivity and what it is, what the role it plays in IoT, and also how things like Starlink and other new technologies that may enter the market may influence decentralized connectivity. So I think you'll find a lot of value out of it, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. But before we get into it, if any of you out there are looking to enter the fast-growing and profitable IoT market, but don't know where to start, check out our sponsor, Leverage. Leverage's IoT solutions development platform provides everything you need to create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT For All podcast. Welcome, Jacob, to the IoT For All show. Thanks for being here this week.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, we've been talking on and off here and there, and it was finally good to have you as a guest on the show. This would be an exciting conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And I was on here a few months ago talking about some asset tracking stuff. So
right.
Good to be back.
Yeah, that was on the news and interview series with Digital Matter. Yeah, you had some really interesting stuff to talk about. That was awesome. So let's dive in. Let's have you first start off giving an introduction about yourself, background, experience, anything that's relevant to give our audience some context on who they're listening to.
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Jacob Swinn. I'm the product marketing manager here at Helium. I've been here since May of 2021, so going on about 9 months. I guess in the tech startup world, 9 months seems like 5 years sometimes with all the growth and everything that's happened, especially with Helium. But really excited to kind of talk about, Helium's 2021, what we have to look forward to in 2022 and beyond, and kind of go over some key things that Helium's working on or has done recently.
What about so before Helium, what were you doing? Kind of what was the focus? What led you to Helium? I guess is a good question.
It's a pretty non-traditional path. I was actually I was a high school teacher for a number of years, and then before I got too old, I decided to make a career change. I went and got my MBA in marketing and leadership, and then I knew someone working at Helium and kind of reached out to them right before I graduated with my MBA, and I was lucky enough to get hired here, and kind of, as with many startups, especially in tech, you kind of get thrown in the deep end and just, sink or swim. But it's been really cool. It's been awesome, a learning experience for me. It's been cool to kind of help people learn about Helium, and really exciting to move forward with them.
So talk to us a little bit about Helium in general, and maybe also kind of take us to where Helium kind of was in the focus when you joined versus where they are now, and the overall goal and focus for them in the industry.
Yeah, so Helium was founded in 2013, basically with the mission to make it easier to build decentralized wireless networks, founded by Amir Haleem and Sean Fanning. Sean Fanning, people might know that name from Napster fame.
Napster, right.
Yeah, exactly. And the current iteration of Helium, as we kind of know it now, with like the hotspots and coverage and everything, has been around since 2019. So it's still fairly young. When I started, the goals were pretty much the same. The network was just much smaller. I mean, I have a graphic in front of me. At the beginning of 2021, there were 14,000 hotspots online, and now we just hit 500,000, I think yesterday or the day before.
Wow.
So the growth in the last year, the first blog I wrote, I think I referenced like 24,000, and that was in like April and May, so it's been insane. But yeah, a ton of growth in the last even 6 months.
And so you mentioned hotspots. So let's dive in a little bit more to kind of how Helium works. What's the overall premise? I'm sure a lot of our listeners have come across it because you kind of play in two different areas, right? You play in the IoT space from a commercial standpoint, but you also play in it on the consumer side as the users or the, adopters of the hotspots, the ones that are hooking them up. So tell us a little bit about how this all works. What's the overall point of it all? What's the goal and objective here? and then we'll dive in further from there.
Yeah. Well, initially, like I said, in 2019, when kind of this version of Helium, quote unquote, launched, users were incentivized to build out the network. I mean, basically, a hotspot owner becomes their own telco. I mean, you're providing coverage from that hotspot, and users were incentivized to build out the coverage by those hotspots mining what's called HNT, Helium Native Token, which is our cryptocurrency. And that was kind of ingenious in the way to get that network coverage and get that network growing, because, you're spending money on a miner on a hotspot, and you're getting some ROI from that while you're building out the Helium network. And so that's really helped to grow the coverage all over the world. And like I said, we got like 500,000 hotspots online now. So coverage, and I think we're in over 160 countries. So pretty sure there are 195 countries in the world. So I mean, we're closing in on everywhere. Yeah. So now the focus is a little bit, that coverage is there, and we want to see usage on the network, because it's really cool that there are so many real world applications and things that can help people that can be done on the Helium network. And now that coverage is there, those are so much easier to implement and deploy.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into my next question, which is around the use cases and the applications that the network is enabling. So as more hotspots are deployed and there is more network coverage all across the world, what is the focus from an application standpoint? Are you all focused on certain verticals, certain use cases, certain device types? Like, how does that all work from your all's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we have certain kind of key verticals that are always going to be relevant in the IoT space, such as like asset tracking. Like I said, I talked about asset tracking earlier on this pod a few months ago, but that's always going to be a big one with IoT. But I mean, there are so many different use cases, and I'm finding out about stuff that I didn't even know like was possible or existed. We were looking at one just recently where one of the companies is using IoT sensors to like track wildfire movement and things like that. I'm on the West Coast in the United States. I mean, that's very relevant to me. I definitely want to see something like that. So yeah, I mean, our website lists 5 key verticals, like I said, and environmental monitoring, asset tracking, smart water monitoring, smart cities, and smart agriculture. But that's not at all a comprehensive list. There are things in a lot of different areas. That's really cool to see.
And I know you all did some stuff with the city of San Jose, right? Like, talk a little bit more about that. I know that's a more public kind of thing. So just share kind of what the goal was there and what ended up happening.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I mean, just to preface it a little bit, when I was kind of looking for jobs, one thing I really wanted was a company where I could really see a tangible way and that they were helping like the community out, helping people. And so the city of San Jose in September or October, I can't remember when our official announcement went out, but they became the first city to kind of adopt to partner with Helium, and they have deployed Helium compatible hotspots. And so they're building out network coverage. And at the same time, the earnings from those hotspots are going to fund internet access for low income households. So you're getting people who can't afford internet. And so Helium's helping out that way while the network's being built out. So I think that's awesome, man. That's really
cool. That's really cool. So when the network is deployed, what do, I guess, companies who want to be on the network need to do? Like, are they building devices that specifically work with the Helium network? How does that how do they approach it from that side to build something that can utilize the Helium network?
Let me make sure I'm understanding this right. So like if a company wants to kind of use Helium to deploy solutions, is what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of companies kind of build their own devices that that work on Helium. But the nice thing about Helium is it's really easy to get started. Pretty much any compatible Class A LoRaWAN device, you can get up and running on the Helium network. So
that makes sense.
If a company doesn't necessarily have the resources or they don't have their own devices or something like that, it's still fairly easy. There's a low overhead cost to get started.
Right.
With Helium.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. More of that, the LoRaWAN side of it, just to kind of understand what they need to be building for. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, how does I guess one thing that'd be interesting to hear from your side of things is the overall connectivity landscape in IoT obviously grows, and it enables lots of different things. And your approach is very unique. And one of the other kind of hot topics when it comes to connectivity is the cellular side. So how does Helium network and the technology there compare to utilizing, let's say, cellular, for instance, to potentially run a similar application on that type of network? Like, what are the benefits and kind of value there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing to take into consideration is just the comparable coverage. I think a
Okay.
lot of people, when they're thinking of like Helium or a LoRa network, and comparing it to like a Verizon or an AT&T, they think like, oh, those major telcos are going to have much better coverage. But like I said, we're in 160 some countries in the world now. I mean, so we have comparable coverage to cell, which is really
Mm-hmm.
cool, especially in those urban areas. I mean, it's the difference is negligible, but um, Helium basically is a lot cheaper. That's the main thing.
Okay.
Like I talked about asset tracking. So like a LoRa device, I mean, LoRa devices in general are going to be cheaper, there's no SIM card needed, just fewer components and things like that. So, you know, um, industry average for like a high performing GPS tracker is around $100. You can get, a good LoRa one for half of that, and it's going to, still do the same kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big one right there. The data usage costs, again, for Helium, kind of our standard example is one device sending data every 5 minutes costs around a little over $1 per year. Whereas like, again, industry average for like a GPS tracker is going to be, around $10 per year. So if you're deploying a large fleet of like tracking devices or something, that's huge savings once you add that up.
Right.
That plus you get, Helium's a totally decentralized network.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're not getting contracts, you're not getting locked into a lot of cell networks. You get locked into a contract where you're probably paying for things that you aren't really using. You're paying for, overages on data fees, stuff like that. Like with Helium, you don't get those contracts. You only pay based on usage. So when you send data, you're paying for that, but you're not paying for anything that you don't need. You're not just locked into a subscription or a contract or things like that. And then just with the Helium blockchain, you've got total transparency into transactions and privacy for your data. Data is totally encrypted. And so, you see cell networks, telcos, stuff like that have been shown to like, sell user data and stuff like that without permission. And so we don't see any of your data. There's none of that happening as well. So, there are more, but those are some of the main ones right there, just between Helium and cell. Yeah, a lot of big benefits to using Helium.
Yeah, I was just curious kind of how it stacks up to in the landscape of different connectivity options that are out there, obviously for solutions, and every technology kind of is more well suited for certain applications versus others, just depending on kind of what is needed to have that use case be or solution be a success. So all that makes a ton of sense. How do you kind of view something like Starlink influencing the direction that you all are going? Like, how does that potentially either compete or complement, or what is your all's view on something, that ambitious of a project to kind of try to carve out a role in the IoT connectivity space?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be completely honest. We haven't, or at least I haven't, talked that much about Starlink it hasn't come up that much
Yeah,
in the job right now. But, I think that any kind of innovation, any kind of forward movement in this space it's always good, even if it becomes as like competition or something, I'm not saying Starlink
sure,
is Helium, but like that type of thing just forces, any company to kind of innovate and to
of
maybe,
course.
push forward even quicker than they were, come up with it might, spur some new idea, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think anything going on with like Starlink, any of that type of stuff, is
Yep.
really, it's a good thing in this space because, to be honest, I mean, this space is still, I'm not going to say it's new, obviously, but there's a lot that can still be done in this
Of course.
space, and anyone pushing the envelope there is always good for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversations I've recently had on the podcast are around just the increasing the number of choices and the lower the complexity to adoption for IoT. And I think obviously network
Sure.
coverage and affordability all play into that, especially from an ROI perspective. So any company that's contributing to that is truly helping kind of overall growth and adoption across the industry as a whole. So that makes
Yeah.
makes a ton of sense. Let me ask
And
then. Oh, go ahead, sir.
sorry, yeah, I was just going to say, you mentioned ease of use. I think that's a really big one with IoT, LoRaWAN, anything in that kind of space a little bit. So like you said, anything making it simpler for people to kind of adopt that, deploy solutions, get it out there more. A lot of people aren't even aware of IoT or LoRaWAN. I mean, I talk to people all the time that have never even heard of it, and so yeah, absolutely right. Getting it more mainstream and just making it simpler for people to use, definitely a good thing.
Absolutely. One of the last questions I want to ask you before we wrap up here is around, and maybe I know you've been at the company for maybe, I wouldn't say it's the longest time, but obviously it's not the shortest time either. What have you seen in the space since you've been in IoT from a challenges perspective that you all have worked to overcome, the industry has maybe is working to overcome, or maybe some of the challenges you see as as things we need to be focusing our efforts on in order to help IoT grow from where it is now?
Yeah, I think kind of what I was just talking about, just that education and
Yep.
getting the message out more, and that's something we're really working on at Helium, especially me on the marketing side, is just showing people like what IoT can do, what it can enable for people, like all that stuff, the city of San Jose, those other
Right.
things I mentioned, like there are so many real world applications,
Right.
like, I could measure, I don't know, I work with like the university here and, you know, with COVID, especially, they want to, monitor room air quality, monitor number of people in a building, that kind of thing, all those types of things that, it's just an education piece that it's hard to get out there because people sometimes are just kind of scared of the unknown,
Yep.
and need to just learn and see more of what IoT can do.
Sure.
And then, obviously with COVID, the supply chain issues are rough. I don't think sensors and devices have been impacted nearly as much as like, just gateways and hardware and stuff like that. But we have more makers coming on.
Okay.
It is what it is. There's not a lot we can do about that, but the coverage is still growing. People are still wanting to join Helium, and hopefully things get better.
Definitely agree.
Yeah.
So what does the future look like for you all? What's 2022? What's the plan, like the public stuff you can obviously talk about that you're most focused on, excited about? It doesn't have to be necessarily directly related to Helium, but it could be related to the industry and things you're hoping happen.
Yeah, there are a couple of specific Helium related things, and at the risk of being too salesy, people
Sure.
can go
Yeah,
check
yeah.
it out on like helium.com, and we have news and stuff like that. But like our Helium docs can explain some of these things. But like
Cool.
light hotspots, we introduced staking validators in June of 2021 to kind of take some of the pressure off the network. With
Right.
the network growth so much, light hotspots are planning on being here sometime in, before the first half of 2022, hopefully. And, again, that will just help the network be more efficient,
Sure.
work better, stuff like that. So if you want to learn more about that, check it out on our site. Helium has partnered with some major roaming partners. We've partnered with Senate and Actility, and like some, Actility has like Volvo, Schneider Electric, Cisco,
Right.
that, as their users. So just more roaming on the network, which means that, obviously that means more network traffic for Helium, more
Sure.
usage, but that's expanding coverage,
Okay.
for Helium and those partners as well. Those are some of the big things that I can
Sure.
talk about. There are some really cool things that I'm working on for sure that we're excited to
Cool.
have some announcements coming up in the near future.
So going to the website is probably the best way to stay on top of things
Going to
for
the
our audience.
website, yes, and the Helium blog. You just
Okay.
kind of Helium blog, but that gives pretty high level overview of most of the new things that are coming out and announcements. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Well, Jacob, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on and just kind of diving into all things helium, decentralized communication, kind of how, what this is enabling, which I think is a very interesting thing for us to be paying attention to as the market continues to grow. So thanks again for your time.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching that episode of the IoT For All podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification so you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.